So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and this time we're going to be seeing how IMLADRIS get on in the open field. More specifically, we are on the chessboard, which is kind of just a novelty version of the grassy plain really. It's obviously completely flat. The squares don't have any impact on the gameplay whatsoever, but it's kind of neat. I mean, it's at least a different palette swap to the grassy plain, which obviously we've seen quite a lot of in the past. And it is going to be 3 IMLADRIS armies all on the same team. They are going to be the blue team, so it's going to be a unified faction against pretty much the world, because we have Erebor, Harad and Arthedain arrayed against them today, so that's a pretty decent mix of quality focus, AP and just all around good play from all of these factions. Obviously infantry focus for the dwarves, a little bit more cavalry and range focus for Arthedain, and then obviously Harad can bring the numbers, being an evil men faction, so a wide variety of threats that IMLADRIS are going to have to deal with today. But obviously IMLADRIS very, very good in terms of the quality of their army, generally speaking, but they can, particularly on a very open map like this, be a little bit more susceptible to being overwhelmed. But we'll see how they get on, because obviously it is easier said than done to overwhelm the elves, particularly in IMLADRIS if they go very quality heavy. We'll start off on this side of the battlefield with Baconfish 302, and his general's going to be in the Gwathi Rockdoor unit, which on an open field like this is not too surprising, to be honest with you. The IMLADRIS Knights, very, very strong, obviously pretty swift. And obviously, you know, knights just in general, the kings of the open field, a lot of damage, multiple HP, and obviously good against other cavalry in melee as well. Speaking of which, a couple of units here, well actually one unit of the IMLADRIS Sentinels, which are spear cavalry, so they do have a bonus against other cavalry. They're kind of like the happy middle ground between lance cavalry and melee cavalry. They can sort of do a bit of both. And the IMLADRIS Sentinels obviously pair that with Elven skill, so they almost have no downsides, but they don't have a shield, so in spite of their good armor values, they can still be peppered down from a distance. Speaking of which, Norteno Cowboy, the lowest tier of IMLADRIS cavalry, but even low tier Elven Lancers have got their place, of course. They are Lance cavalry. They do have the armor upgrade though, so a little bit tankier perhaps, and obviously again their Elven skill should help mitigate some of the downsides they suffer in melee against other cav. And then out here on the flank, looks like we've got 2 units of the IMLADRIS Riders with the armor upgrade, so obviously again very good horse archers actually. When you upgrade the armor on them as well, obviously they've got that Elven accuracy, obviously very, very accurate generally Elven archers, but also the armor upgrade means they're a little bit tankier than most horse archers. But as with a lot of IMLADRIS' units, this will cost you to get both the unit and to upgrade the armor. It is a fairly big investment for a horse archer unit, which generally does its damage very slowly over time in a sort of harassing kind of way. Meanwhile, 3 units, really? 3 units of Eldar Enway Haruquinga. That is a big investment on the archer version. We have seen this work before, of course, full Eldar Enway armies, but even so, Haruquinga obviously fantastic at range, very good in melee as well, as most heavy Elven archers are, but the days of them being grossly overpowered are gone, so I would wonder how they're going to get on, particularly seeing as Baconfish is going up against the dwarves on this flank, and they should be able to mitigate quite a lot of arrow damage, although it looks as though IMLADRIS is going to try and play this quite narrow, which makes a lot of sense considering their lower numbers overall. And then a couple of units here of Eldar Quinga at the back, so the lower tier archers without the armor upgrade, but obviously even lower tier Elven units are basically the mid tier for most other factions. And 2 pieces of artillery. We've seen Baconfish be quite fond of bringing more than 1 artillery piece even on an open field before. We'll see if this actually helps them. I'm sure you can see the big monsters over there in the background. The Mumakil will have very limited issues they'll have very limited issues getting to the artillery if they are allowed to. However, something like the ballista or the catapult could cause them to run amok very, very quickly, so it could be a bit of a shrewd pick here from Baconfish. Moving on to the player who sent this to me, we have Lord Griffiths, who is going to be also playing as IMLADRIS, of course, and it looks as though once again his general going to be in the Gwathi Rockdoor unit. I would be very surprised if one of the IMLADRIS generals was not in this unit, to be honest with you, because they're so good on an open field like this. Only his cavalry a little bit less in terms of numbers, but he has got the Heru Myro, which as far as lancers go, they are one of the very few sort of base lancers without multiple HP to get a full charge bonus of 20. In fact, even some of the multiple HP lancers don't get a charge bonus of 20, whereas I believe the Heru Myro still have that in 0.96. I'm not sure whether that will still be the case when they become the standard bearers in 0.97 though. We also have some Eldar Quinga here at the front with the armor upgrade, making them a little bit better in the skirmish fight, and they are right along the line, very wide formation actually here from Lord Griffiths. He's got the stakes at the front, but that's only a very small surface area. He does need to be careful. Obviously Harad, with all of their very trash tier skirmishers, they can actually skirmish down with the elves by just sort of burying them under a mountain of trash. Don't know if Harad are going to be sort of charging across the field and be so eager to engage the elves that quickly. We'll see, because there is a lot of space for them to do so here in the middle. Eldar Enway Haru Heavy Elven Spears, of course, are also very, very good because they can offset that Spear Malice just because they have so much skill. Good armour, of course, fancy, the defensive skill and armour put together of IMLADRIS is really very, very strong, but obviously very expensive and not very many men in the unit to sort of offset that. And some IMLADRIS Guardians here with the armour upgrade, so investing a lot into his line infantry. Harad are going to struggle to deal with this from the front. Obviously the Mumakil will punch right through, but when it comes down to sort of a prolonged melee fight, really only the Trollmen are going to be able to sort of hold their own here. Even upgraded dismounted Serpent Guard are really not going to enjoy going up against IMLADRIS Guardians for any length of time. Speaking of which, they also have a little bit of reinforcements here in the second line. Some IMLADRIS Blade Masters, not AP, but they do have a bonus against Cavalry in 0.96, which is very much worth paying attention to. And then over here in the middle, some Gwathi Arthand, which I've noticed in the past that they tend to take a long time dying when they're in sustained melee. They don't necessarily kill things all that quickly, but generally speaking in 0.96 you won't expect spears to do that. A few changes on the way obviously for 0.97 with regards to some of their bonuses though. Heru Masil, or Heru Makil, I'm not really sure how you pronounce a lot of these names obviously, I've been doing it for a while at this point, yeah, I'm still not very good at it. But as far as their stats goes, again, very, very strong. And Harad, I should say, are going to really struggle to deal with them one-to-one. And finally, the final IMLADRIS army, Ending Flame 0210, and all of his infantry, looks as like they're going to reinforce Lord Griffiths' position. This will obviously allow Arthur Dane to start flanking around, but it looks as though he's gone for a little bit heavier of an infantry corps. He actually has the God Halim Einauer, which is this the general? That might be Elrond, so he might actually have his general in a footbound unit. But multiple HP archers, terrific in melee of course, not quite as strong as they once were back when they were the Nolder Elder Nobles, but that was back when they were OP, so this is much more of a reasonable unit, and obviously nice shields as well. A couple of units of Norteno Warriors, pretty decent in melee actually for their cost. They still suffer a little bit of range because they don't have the best armor values, especially next to some of the other IMLADRIS units, but overall a little bit better than the Eldar Quinga is how you can think of them. Some Heru Quinga over here as well, obviously much better in general. Heru Hatal and Heru Makil again, and then we have the upgraded IMLADRIS Guardians, all of the IMLADRIS banners fluttering in the breeze, and then we have some Eldar Makar and some Eldar Atar, although the Makar have been upgraded. You know, Heru Hatal as well, and also good to see that Ending Flame has brought some cavalry as well to really sort of press home all of the IMLADRIS forces having some cavalry to sort of dart around the field. 2 units of IMLADRIS Sentinels as well, Spear Cavalry maybe a little bit more defensive, but against Arthur Dane that could be quite a good move because Arthur Dane generally have got some nice cavalry themselves. Speaking of which, let's go and see what Arthur Dane have brought. We have JD Thoma 1994. He has got some Arthur Dane marksmen here at the front, which as far as skirmishing units go, you know, they can hold their own in a skirmish fight fairly well. But against the elves, and especially in the volume that IMLADRIS have brought their own archers, they probably won't hold up too well if they're focused. Speaking of which, some Evendim Spearmen, obviously sort of fairly cheap militia spears. As far as militia goes, they're very good, but as far as quality goes, they're going to find themselves very outmatched by the IMLADRIS forces today. The classic Arthur Dane phalanx is in effect as well, because they are going to be backed up by some Arthur Dane pikemen with the armour upgrade, giving them their breastplate. The pikes might be one of the few areas in which Arthur Dane can actually sort of put up a decent fight in melee, because over time those pikes will force IMLADRIS back, and they don't have any of their own pikes in IMLADRIS. They haven't brought the high tier pike that they have access to today, so pikes could be a good way to go. Fornoster Rain Knights, one of those few units with higher skill. Human Swordmaster units in general can hold their own just a little bit better against the elves and a lot of other types of units, but they will still be outmatched by some of the better IMLADRIS units. And they've got 2 units of them. Numinous Gate Guards, which I believe have got the ability to inspire units around them, which will be very necessary if Arthur Dane are in melee with IMLADRIS for any length of time, and obviously as a pike unit they will have the same benefit as the Arthur Dane pikemen that I've already mentioned. Not surprising to see the Arthur Dane General in the Knights of Illuminas. Overall they are the tankiest units of Knights. I don't know if they would win in melee with the Gwathi Rockdor though. I feel as though the Elven sort of higher melee skill in general will probably put them in pretty good stead. But overall, the Knights of Illuminas, if they can get a decent charge on pretty much any element of the IMLADRIS army, they will get huge value very, very quickly. Some Fornoster Rain Knights as well, so obviously sort of the mid-level Arthur Dane Lance. They do have the cheap Arthur Dane Sergeants, but obviously the Fornoster Rain Knights just a little bit better than them, obviously good charges. And then 2 units of the Dunedain Mounted Company in this patch. Probably the most cost-effective Lancer that Arthur Dane have available to them, because as Dunedain they have slightly higher melee skill, so they will be able to stand up a little bit better at melee, but against a lot of the IMLADRIS cavalry that skill is going to be overshadowed by IMLADRIS' own skill. And over here we have Harad. I'd be interested to see what they brought actually. So they've got 2 units of Haradrian Raiders, which obviously again bow cavalry, cheap, much cheaper than the IMLADRIS bow cavalry. Can be used to decent effect to sort of harass the enemy lines, but IMLADRIS are going to be able to zone them out very easily with their archers if they get sent forward on their own. This is Bloodbath McGrath, by the way. This is not the Harad General, but we do have the Black Serpents. Now the Black Serpent bodyguard, obviously multiple HP Lancers, very quick to move around the battlefield, obviously nice charges as well. They really don't want to get stuck in melee with a lot of the IMLADRIS cavalry, however, because they don't have any bonus against cavalry. Speaking of which, another unit which is basically the lower level version of them is the standard Serpent Guard. They've obviously been a thing ever since Vanilla 3rd Age. They're good as Lancers, but they do need to be really careful in this sort of situation because IMLADRIS is so good on horseback in melee that they don't want to be caught up in that for too long. He's got some Haradrian Spearmen and some Southron Warband making up the front line. Southron Warband a good choice actually, I think, because they are reasonably cheap, at least for what they offer, because they are AP spears, which will give them that extra bit of punch against a lot of the heavily armoured IMLADRIS units. The melee skill is still going to be a problem, of course, but the armour will be a little bit less scary with these guys on hand. We do have the upgraded version of the Dismounted Serpent Guard, which I'm a bit of a fan of, but in this situation they will be overshadowed in terms of their own quality, so they do need to be careful. 1-to-1 the IMLADRIS Guardians will destroy them. Now this is a unit which could prove to be key as the fight goes along. The Hashari Stalkers, which are of course the Haradrian Rangers, that body piercing projectile that they have, going to be very, very key in dealing with a lot of the IMLADRIS forces. The armour and shields will help them from the front, of course, but if the Hashari Stalkers can situate themselves correctly, they can do a lot of damage to the relatively small IMLADRIS armies, particularly the one in the middle here, all at once. We of course have the Trollmen of Harad. I'm not surprised at all to see Trollmen, because obviously one of the very few units in the Harad roster which can genuinely go toe-to-toe, one-on-one with some of the better IMLADRIS units. Some AP from the Muhad Berserkers, but the lower melee skill on the Muhad Berserkers will hurt them. They don't have a lot of armour either, so stuff like the IMLADRIS Blade Masters will rip through the Muhad Berserkers. We also have some Muhad Beast Hunters, which Javelins could be another way in which the red team deal with the sort of higher quality IMLADRIS forces here, because obviously Javelins a lot of damage very, very quickly, but they need to be careful of the Elven Archers. Speaking of Javelins, we also have the Camels today, the Muhad Beastmasters, another unit that has been here ever since Vanilla. They can panic other cavalry, although I've never really seen the panic mechanic on the Camels really come into effect, but they are good anti-cavalry tools nonetheless. Javelins, bonus against cav and melee, so one of the few units which IMLADRIS might want to be a little bit careful around. Some more Serpent Guard, and then finally, of course, where Harad has spent a lot of their money here, is the Mumakil. Now, how the Mumakil are used could decide this fight actually, because they're such a big investment for Harad that if they are wasted and picked off by the artillery very, very quickly, it could be a bad time for Harad, because they really don't have the numbers and the quality to go toe-to-toe with IMLADRIS head-on, unless their Mumakil are running interference in the back lines. And then finally, we have Captain Gervase playing as the Dwarves of Erebor. A little bit more in terms of quality perhaps on foot here. We have the Ironfoot Axe Throwers, which obviously could do a lot of damage at range to IMLADRIS. His general is the Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin, which are a very, very strong unit. This is one of the units which can sort of give IMLADRIS what for in melee in the vast majority of cases. Ironfoot Halberds as well, so some AP phalanx going on, which, considering IMLADRIS don't have any phalanx units of their own, will have free reign if they manage to get into formation close up. Ironfoot crossbows as well. They will be outranged by the elves, but as soon as they get in range, those AP projectiles are going to be very, very handy at equalising that melee fight. A combination of Ironfoot pikes and Ironfoot spears. Obviously the pikes, again, the phalanx is going to be good for the reasons that I've mentioned, provided the elven archers don't ravage them first, but the Ironfoot spears are here to sort of act as a blocker unit. Axeguard of Erebor, AP, again useful, potentially, but again the elves do boast higher skill levels. Erebor Legionaries, which are sort of more quality focused, Dwarven line infantry unit. Perhaps you could see them as a bit of an equivalent to the IMLADRIS Guardians, but I don't know, I think the IMLADRIS Guardians just overall are a little bit stronger. Some more Ironfoot Warriors out here on the flank, some Blacklock Engineers. I'm glad to see the Blacklocks because again they're such a powerful unit if you can situate them correctly. All the benefits of crossbows combined with all the benefits of Rangers, and you get the Blacklock Engineers. And then finally, I'm sure that you thought I was going to skip over them, but I'm not. We have a Dwarven Cavalry unit. In particular, we have the Ironfoot Hammer Guard, which are perhaps the strongest melee cavalry unit, at least the strongest unit in sustained melee of all the cavalry units on the field today, other than potentially the Mumakill, although the way the Mumakill work in sustained melee is kind of weird. But yeah, the Ironfoot Hammer Guard, one of the stronger units on horseback. Goat back, we will see today. But without further ado, let's begin. Now, 22,000 frames is sort of what you would expect perhaps from a very open 3v3 from this, so I'm quite interested to see how this progresses. Now, I did mention all of the missteps that the red team could make, but IMLADRIS could also make a few missteps here. The way they use their cavalry is going to be key, because they have got a lot of cavalry on the field today, and if they misuse them, if they are not used correctly, then IMLADRIS's melee force will find themselves utterly overwhelmed. Baconfish has got a lot of ranged units, so 3 units of Heru Quinga, 2 units of Eldar Quinga and 2 units of artillery is going to give the skirmish advantage squarely to the elves, and obviously the IMLADRIS riders as well count as a skirmish unit as well. Although a little bit more for harassment purposes than just sort of standing in a line and shooting, like most archers. Norteno warriors heading out to the flank. You can see here that immediately Arthedain are going to move to the centre, which actually I do not agree with. I believe that Arthedain would be much better off trying to wrap around the elves here. If you go to reinforce Harad's infantry push from the front, you're really kind of playing into the elves' hands. I've always said that, well, what I've always thought is that when you're engaging the elves, you need to try and make the battlefield as big as possible. If you make it narrow, you're just going to allow their high quality units to get huge value on your own. And that's what I'm slightly worried about, just based on these very initial moves here as Arthedain starts to move into the centre. Now you could also say that Harad needs a bit of support in melee, because the Mumakill are such a big investment that they've skimped out a little bit, and even Harad have gone pretty heavy on their cav. I mean, they've gone for a fair amount of Serpent Guard here, as well as their own horse archers. So you could say that, but I would also say that it's quite unlikely that the Harad were ever going to charge through the middle anyway, and even with the Arthedain reinforcements, I don't think they're going to do that. We'll see. Haradrim raiders moving out to the side, who could get some harassment over here, but the Norteno warriors would almost certainly just shoot them. What have we here? IMLADRIS riders just sort of positioning themselves out on the flank of this battle. The dwarves are moving in, slowly and surely. Now, to be fair, the dwarves have probably got the best approach. They've probably... Overall, it's a lot of elven arrows they're still going to have to wade through, but the dwarves are better than pretty much any other racial type of faction at absorbing arrow fire with their good armour and their generally decent shield values. So charging forward might be the best move here, and ironically Baconfish's double artillery build might actually convince them to do so. Now this would obviously open them up to a lot of ranged fire as well, a lot of cavalry action going on, as the IMLADRIS riders begin the process of trying to harass the Black Blocks. They need to be careful, however, because the Black Blocks are going to be able to withstand an awful lot of this sort of punishment, multiple HP, good shield value, and they are just going to sit here and take it, and here come the Black Block bolts, and that is going to tear through the IMLADRIS rider units. It was only like a few bolts that went in and 4 horsemen died, which represents a pretty decent chunk of the unit, honestly. In terms of relative costs, over here, meanwhile, the same thing is happening, only it's the red team using their horse archers to harass over here, trying to do as much damage to the IMLADRIS sentinels as possible. And they don't have a shield, so no shield value to concern themselves with. Good armour though on the IMLADRIS units. The Haru Myro from Lord Griffiths also coming over here. I do wonder whether or not these Haradrim raiders are a little bit isolated. They need to be careful they don't get boxed into the corner, for one. But they don't have any support from other cavalry units over here, which obviously is opening up a bit of a gap for the Haru Myro to start moving over here. Meanwhile, let's go and see what's happening here. The crossbows shimmying forwards. The Haru Quinga in tight formation, actually, they need to be careful. A few volleys from the Ironfoot crossbowmen, and this will turn into a game of Napoleon Total War. A few crispy corpses there as Baconfish's artillery continues to try and do damage, but I think the dwarves, they are in a sort of wide enough formation that the artillery isn't likely to get hugely damaging hits. Really the best thing they can hope for is that they get right into the middle of this formation here with the pikes and spears, which they are going for. But as things stand, the dwarves will probably be okay with this sort of engagement. Meanwhile, the Haradrim raiders did fly too close to the sun. They allowed themselves to be sort of boxed up against the side of the map, and the IMLADRIS sentinels have caught them in melee, and needless to say the Haradrim raiders certainly not designed to go into melee with IMLADRIS spear cavalry. Meanwhile, over here, this is... The Grey Company have been brought by Arthedain as well. They revealed themselves, so mounted rangers. The Fornoster Rain Knights blocking their charge into the Grey Company, but the Haru Myro will win this fight. It's a fight between 2 Lancer units, but needless to say, the Elven Lancers are of higher skill. There goes the body-piercing projectiles, and this could be a little bit painful for IMLADRIS, because now the Horse Archers able to fire right into this blob, and some of these projectiles are body piercing. More cavalry is on the way, the Black Serpents, the Knights of Illuminas. IMLADRIS need to get out of here because this is not a good engagement for them at this point. Initially it went quite well, they managed to get the Haradrim Raiders into a bit of a melee fight, but they chased them too far, and they attracted the ire of all of the strongest red team cavalry units, and that's going to be painful for them. They lost a lot of sentinels in that fight. In fact, they may have lost all of their sentinels because they're probably going to rout off here. The Knights of Illuminas are here, and the Knights of Illuminas, tanks on horseback. The Haru Myro have also managed to get themselves sandwiched between the two tiers of Serpent Guard units that Harad can bring. And the Blacks, neither of these are melee cavalry units, but together, with their might combined, the Haru Myro not going to be having the best of this engagement. And this is a very strong unit, which IMLADRIS are essentially going to lose here, as the Serpent Guard continue to pummel them in melee with their scimitars. Black Serpents doing work, the Grey Company doing work, although the Grey Company needs to be careful here because they're going to get some friendly fire on their own units. But that is going to be the end of this IMLADRIS cavalry force, so not a good start for IMLADRIS over on this side. And this is of course going to open the way for the Haradrim Raiders to once again get in behind Ending Flame 0210's army and start harassing them once more. And the Raiders have already done their job. The fact that they were used as the bait to draw those IMLADRIS cavalry too far and allow them to get destroyed. IMLADRIS cavalry is so expensive. And over here you can see these Haru Vital getting shot in the back, and from this position their shield will not come into play, so they're going to be relying fully on their armour values to soak up this fire, and they're not multiple HP, remember. So over time this will have an impact. The Norteno warriors are shooting back, and to be fair, as time goes on the Haradrim Raiders will get destroyed by the IMLADRIS skirmishers. But Bloodbath McGrath with some good use here of the horse archers. Cheap horse archers as well, so very easy to get good value from them. And so it has turned out to be. Will IMLADRIS live to regret their cavalry focus here? Because that was not a good start. The Haru Myro routing off, and with only two of them, they won't return. The last thing IMLADRIS need is for the red team to have the cavalry advantage, because all it's going to take is a few charges, and huge swathes of the IMLADRIS army will be destroyed. Meanwhile, over here, the skirmish fight has been ongoing, and the Ironfoot crossbows have been having the worst of it, by the looks of things. They have been out of range, and I'm actually surprised that the dwarves have not charged in here. Considering the victory that his allies have won on the other side, considering all of the cavalry which has already been destroyed, I'm surprised he wasn't emboldened to come forward, actually, Captain Gervase, because a lot of this IMLADRIS army is skirmishers. Now Baconfish could try to kite the dwarves, which, with the archers he would be successful, but his artillery certainly can't kite. That would be very slow to get rid of, and he would also be opening his ally up to being wrapped up by the dwarves. It would be risky, but I do like what he's doing here with his infantry. He's put them into loose formation. He is continuing to take sort of piece by piece casualties from Baconfish's artillery, but this IMLADRIS artillery is not going to be worth the huge amount that Baconfish has spent on it if he continues to just fire into these loose formation troops, because he's only going to be killing 3 or 4 units at a time. And catapults and ballista are expensive, so definitely doing the right thing there. So perhaps that's what he's doing, just trying to sort of soak up all of the artillery fire, take away a lot of what Baconfish has invested in, and then Baconfish will be sort of reduced really down to his archer power, as well as the cavalry units that he's got. And you can see over here that now with the cavalry battle won on the other side, Harad's cavalry, as well as some of Arthedain's Dunedain Mounted Company, filtering over here, as well as the Grey Company, they're shifting their cavalry power over to this flank of the battlefield so they can deal potentially with Baconfish's Sentinels, Riders and Norteno Cavalry, which is a good move. I like this from the red team so far. They're working together quite nicely in tandem. Let's see what's happening over here. You can see here the Haradrim Raiders, as time has gone on, they have found themselves completely destroyed, although the fact that they charged in suggests that maybe they used up all their ammunition. You can see quite a lot of these elven spears have fallen, destroyed, and overall the Haradrim Raiders certainly did their job. The fact that they were the root cause really of killing off so much of the IMLADRIS cavalry over here was worth it in and of themselves. The additional kills they picked up on that unit of Haru Vital is just gravy. But still, obviously, a very slow fight so far, because again, the red team can't afford to just charge in, because in a pure melee fight, IMLADRIS are just going to be able to dumpster pretty much anyone except Khazad-dûm in 0.96, and that's going to be the truth mostly throughout all of Reforged development. IMLADRIS are always going to be one of the strongest in terms of their quality, especially considering Harad's army is mostly focused around mounted units. You can see here that over on this side, the red team certainly doing the right thing, just squeezing the elves, making the elves sort of entrapped here in this middle section of the field. Manoeuvring around here from Baconfish's army. I'm very surprised he brought 3 units of Harry Quinker. That's a lot of range power at range. A lot of range power at range. A lot of archers. They're very good as archers, but it's very expensive to bring that. And I feel as though it's kind of unfortunate in many ways that he was up against the Dwarves of Erebor. Probably the best faction overall to sort of mitigate the damage that these guys would deal. But he could always save them for later as well. And he's already done some good damage to the crossbows. What have we got over here? The cavalry engagement is ongoing. And you can see this unit of Serpent Guard, Bloodbath McGrath, he charged in, perhaps a little bit too greedily, because now he's having to deal with Waithy, Rockdoor and IMLADRIS Sentinels, and this is not a fight the Serpent Guard have any hope of winning. He needs to get his Serpents out of here. He used his cab very well on the other side, but that is going to give the Elves a bit of comfort there. The Archers also going to be able to get more casualties as they try and get out of range. Elven accuracy so deadly, so lethal. Generally speaking, the Serpent Guard, they are some of the more well-armoured Haradrim forces, but they're still not overly focused on their armour, and even their shield value is not that high, although from the back that wouldn't have mattered anyway. More manoeuvring going on, and you can see now the Dwarves starting to move in. This is where the red team need to have good coordination, because if the Dwarves are moving in, Harad and Arthedain will also need to start moving in order to get the best of their engagements here. You can see here that Baconfish is going to move back with his skirmishers. I'm not sure whether he's going to be able to get his artillery out. Well, his artillery was actually fairly close to Lord Griffiths' army, so he should be fine. You can see that... Ooh, hello. Cavalry engagements abound. Here we can see Baconfish going up against... Who's... yeah, Baconfish's Gwaithly Rockdoor going up against the Ironfoot Hammer Guard of Captain Gervase, and now the Dunedain Mounted Company coming in to support. This is not a fight the Gwaithly Rockdoor will win against all of these units, but the support, this firing support here that the IMLADRIS Riders are offering, not insignificant. Here come the Grey Company as well. Those body-piercing projectiles. They're going to kill... They're going to get quite a lot of friendly fire as well, because arrows, once they are loosed, do not discriminate between friend and foe. The Dunedain Mounted Company trying to chase the IMLADRIS Riders off. That would not be the easiest unit for a Lancer to kill in melee, actually, the IMLADRIS Riders, especially with that armour upgrade. Oof. You can see, yeah, the Gwaithly Rockdoor having to pull back. Really neither of those two knight units looking too good. But actually, the Hammer Guard took the worst of that. So overall, the Elven Horse Archers proving themselves to be strong support. Meanwhile, what is this over here? Here we can see that with Lord Griffiths' knight unit charging into the Ironfoot Axe Throwers, that was very, very risky. But it looks as though it's paid off. He's killed off a huge portion of this Axe Thrower unit. He does need to be very cautious, however, because if he gets caught in melee by a cavalry unit, the axe throwers will then be able to pin them, and obviously that's going to be a lot of damage which the elves cannot afford to take. Meanwhile, here in the backfield, still the cavalry engagements are what this battle is focused around, and certainly whoever wins this cavalry engagement is probably going to be setting themselves up for success or failure as the fight goes along. And it looks as though IMLADRIS are still having the best of this, and part of this is because now Baconfish's very heavy archer focus is going to come into play, helping his cavalry try and do damage. His own cavalry force is probably going to be sort of crippled for the rest of the fight. His units are going to be very depleted, especially after coming under fire from the Grey Company and the Blacklock Engineers. That is body piercing of the highest order. But having said that, he has thrown off a lot of this cavalry pressure. Dunedain Mounted Company, 4 Nosterrain Knights. A lot of damage has been done. I don't think the Knights of Illuminus were brought over here, so they are still going to be a factor. But now you can see that the Dwarves are coming under range fire. The Ironfoot Halberds in the very unfortunate situation here of not having a shield and coming under Elven Horse Archer and Foot Archer fire. Most unfortunate for them. Meanwhile, Grey Company, they are probably out of ammunition at this point because they've been a factor in both cavalry fights so far. They have pulled out their blades and they definitely don't want to get too close to these engagements. Meanwhile, this is a very ballsy use of these Elven Knights. I like it. This is high risk but potentially really high reward, although charging into the Dragon Slayers was probably, again, Icarus flew too close to the sun and That is exactly what these Elven Knights have done here. Because the Dragon Slayers are just going to be able to stand up to a charge really well with their strong defensive values, particularly their multiple HP. And as soon as they start swinging their axes in melee, heads start rolling in a big way. The Dunedain Mounted Company are also sort of chasing off these Gwathi Rockdor here, but good. I think this is good from Lord Griffiths, because he's making the Dwarven advance much more staggered, and he's giving Baconfish's firing squad the time it needs to start whittling away at this flank of the Dwarven army, which is looking a little bit haggard at this point. A lot of Elven fire coming from all of Baconfish's units, although at this point Baconfish's archer wing is fully open to attack. These Dunedain Mounted Company and the Black Serpents are coming in, and they are going to be able to silence some of these Elven archers. And the Black Serpents, maybe not the quickest charge in the world, but the Black Serpents do have a very nice charge bonus, multiple HP Lancers. The Dunedain Mounted Company are not actually going after the archers, which is a bit of a mistake in my opinion. They really need, well, it would have been very risky to charge into this unit, but they could have killed off this Eldar Quinga unit before this Elven Cavalry was on the scene if the Arthedain player was a little bit more on the ball. Speaking of which, we can see now that the infantry engagement is going to start happening as we go back down to half speed. Harad are going to try and sort of collapse in and around the Elven front line, try and get into these artillery pieces, which the Ballista in particular hasn't done anything as yet. But the artillery could still be there, again, just as bait. If the Harad player is so eager to kill off the artillery, he's not going to be focusing on the Elven infantry, and the Elven infantry will dumpster the Harad infantry in this fight. Only the Trollman will be able to stand toe-to-toe with the Elven units that are arrayed against them. You can see here some Hashari Stalkers trying to get some damage off. 68 of them still here. The body piercing will work wonders on a unit like the Eldar Atar as well. And over here you can see that now Arthedain moving their own marksmen into position to skirmish down with the Norteno warriors, which actually they will not be too bad at. Norteno warriors not overly focused on their armour, and the Arthedain marksmen relatively sort of cost effective in this sort of position. Although Arthedain need to be ready to move in. Honestly, I would say they need to move in now, because Harad is committing themselves. The dwarves are already being hammered from range by Baconfish's archer army. You know, they need to get in here. They need to start moving their pikes into position and giving their team sort of a solid engagement that they can actually sort of remain in melee for a long time. And those Arthedain pikes will give them that, as long as they aren't shot first. But at this point, you know, advancing with only half of your team into IMLADRIS is perhaps sort of the ultimate recipe for failure in this case. Well, let's go back up to 1 speed. You can see here the Heru Makeel are coming in, and the Ballista is sort of trying its best to get out of here, as well as the archers, and now the Black Serpents are finding themselves broken because they got charged by Elven Knights and were sandwiched in between 2 of the Elven Swordmaster units. And the Dismounted Serpent Guard are a quality unit of line infantry, but in that situation it was pretty much the ultimate death sandwich laid on by IMLADRIS. The Beast Hunter's trying to get into position here, but you can see here that this is where the elves, all of the Elven factions, will excel in this position, where they're sort of really leveraging their quality archers, doing tons of damage. These Heru Quinga are in melee. They've managed to sandwich the Black Serpents in here, and this is going to be the end of the Black Serpents. Gwathi Rockdor from Lord Griffiths, Norteno Cavalry from Baconfish sandwiching them in, and, well, they did actually manage to escape, a few of them anyway. The dwarves need to get in here at this point, because Harad is being torn to shreds. And Harad's infantry was always the worst of the 3 here, and he was the first one in, and his allies were not ready to reinforce him. You can see here Harad's spearmen just getting showered with arrows. And the Southron Warband, very well known as being a very, very efficient unit, are just thoroughly outclassed here. IMLADRIS Blade Masters, with their very long elven blades, destroying them. What is happening over here? You can see here actually that a few of the elven units a little bit further forwards. That will be Harad almost certainly, and a combination of the Trollmen and the Halberds would be able to do quite a lot for the Heru Vital, but you can see here the elves are refocusing all of their archers onto one area of the field at a time, and they are reinforcing this area. Now also the IMLADRIS Guardians are moving up to reinforce them in melee. The Trollmen don't have the best armour values, it's really their main weakness, and that is going to come into play here as the arrows start to fly. Here come the Mumakil. I mean, this is where Harad spent a lot of their money, and if they were going to be useful, now is the time, because the artillery is not going to be able to shoot them. Or it could actually, the Ballista is over here. and it is online, so I'm actually surprised that Ballista was not targeting the Mumakil, because it's really not worth going after the Arthedain Phalanx. He might be trying to go after the Knights of Annuminus, but the Mumakil are the primary threat here. If there's one thing which can make up for Harad's losses so far, it is the Mumakil, as these mighty beasts of war continue to just wade their way through the Elven lines. They can't really afford to stop though, because as soon as they do stop, the elves are going to be able to do quite a lot of damage to them. I'm actually surprised that you can see the elves are starting to fire back at the Mumakil. I'm surprised fire arrows aren't being used. Although elven fire arrows are a little bit weird, because some of them give units body piercing in 0.96, so it might have been a general rule to not allow that to be used. Which might be why the Mumakil were brought in the first place. No fire arrows means less chance of being forced to run amok. Over here the IMLADRIS riders are being hunted by what's left of the Arthedain Cavalry and the Ironfoot Spears. And now the Mumakil are over here, so what's left of Baconfish's cavalry is finally going to be stopped after it did such a good job. But this almost continuous fighting retreat that Baconfish has been working with his cavalry and archer focused army might be coming to an end here, because some of these elven infantry units have sort of been left out in front, and they're going to need support. The Eldarenwe Haruquinga are out here, and obviously I've said before, heavy elven archers, particularly very expensive ones like the Haruquinga, can really hold their own in melee. They're trying to get into these Ironfoot pikes that are still in loose formation, actually, trying to sort of mitigate the archer damage, but loose formation doesn't really work against the elves because they're so accurate that the amount of missed shots they incur from loose formation is not really as extreme as it is with others. And the Hashari Stalkers being focused down now by the Elven Firing Squad. And now, Arthedain are starting to move forward. You can see here the Avendim Spearmen getting into melee. They need the support of those pikes real bad, though. A combination of IMLADRIS Guardians and Gwathi Arthan going up against a singular unit of Avendim Spears is a very lopsided fight indeed. And you can see now the Haruquinga are actually going to be able to surround them. This might be enough to break this unit of Avendim Spearmen here, which is obviously going to be a problem. Arthedain needed their line to be strong, shored up with these pikes, but unfortunately that's not going to be the case. He is running his pikes as well, by the looks of things. So he has taken them out of formation to run them, which is absolutely the right thing to do. His pikes just didn't advance at the same time as his militia, and already his militia fell apart in front of the Elven front line. This is the ultimate strength of IMLADRIS already. In melee they are so strong. Their defensive values are so good that if you make a mistake with how you choose to engage them, this is the sort of thing which can happen. The pikes are here now, but now the pikes are here without any sort of reinforcements, and they're already shaken. And as soon as the Elven Archers get a hold of them as well, the armour upgrade they have will not save them from a full firing line. Eldar Quinga's still firing, of course. Some of these Elven units are a little bit isolated, perhaps, especially seeing as there are Dwarven units here. Here come the Muhard Berserkers. The Dragon Slayers are in here as well. So, a fairly strong point of infantry here, a lot of AP in here, which should help them against these IMLADRIS forces. The Eldar Atar are actually breaking under the force of this advance. The Mumakil's still in rude health as well, which, I mean, at this point the Mumakil need to be the match winners. I'm really surprised actually the Baconfish is not targeting the Mumakil. That might be this engagement over here, actually. Indeed, the Ironfoot Spears are in the back over there, so I imagine that was Baconfish's general.
The enemy are badly bloodied. They have lost half their men.
The Ending Flame, who was sent over as Eldarenwe Haru Makil, who are holding back all of these Ironfoot warriors and halberds all by themselves. Really, really strong, but overall they will be forced to capitulate. Harad and the Dwarves will actually break through the initial Elven defence over here. The archer focus from Baconfish will allow them to do this. There goes another general as well. That was Lord Griffiths' general as well, getting foolishly close to pikemen there. But IMLADRIS do still have all of these units over here, and Arthedain have really drawn the short straw. While the Dwarves and Harad have been able to sort of do a lot of damage over here, ultimately the Elves were focusing quite a lot of resources over against Arthedain, which has led to Arthedain collapsing, really. Their pikes really not able to get situated without getting shot. The Arthedain marksmen doing their best. The Harad Mumakil, though, are still running roughshod all over the Elven back lines, and again, this is probably the best sort of performance we've seen from Mumakil in quite some time. Very often when I see them, they're often running amok by this point, or several of them have died because of javelins. The Elves, however, had no javelins, and their artillery was not targeting them. They are starting to die now, but they have been in melee for a long period of time. Here are the dismounted Fornost Array Knights. Imladris Guardians over here. So obviously,
Half of our men.
dismounted Fornos to Rain Knights actually doing quite well with the support of the Mumakil, winning even. The Dunedain Rangers are here. The elves are chasing down the routing Arthedain forces, but this is giving those Dunedain Rangers a nice shot into the side of those lines. And the Knights of Annúminas are still alive, so Arthedain are down, but not out. What I'm really interested in, however, is whether the Dwarves and Harad can continue to push, because now they're going to sort of not be going up against more disorganised pockets of Elven resistance, but they're going to be going up against some of the heavier Elven infantry, Imladris Guardians and Eldaranwe Haru Makil. Fortunately for them, however, it is Captain Gervase over here, bringing that Dwarven might to bear. Eldar Quinga getting into melee with the Ironfoots. Haru Hatal routing. That's a rare sight. They must have been shot by the Blacklocks, who are depleted but still have ammo, which could be very, very crucial. Meanwhile, some Elven reinforcements did come over here, but so did some Dwarven reinforcements surrounding the surround. Lord Griffiths' cavalry over here. His general died over here, actually, I believe, to the Ironfoot Pikes. That's 2 generals that died in this section of the field. But even the mighty Haru Makil and Haru Quinga struggling against these Dwarven numbers. And could it be that the Dwarves, with their own quality and defensive values, able to sort of drag their team over the edge? The Mumakil as well, huge factor in this battle so far. And the Knights of Annúminas are still healthy. That's going to be a nasty charge as well. Nice. They need to get out of melee though, because the Gwathi Arthand are there. Those spears will be dealing some damage. Obviously the Knights of Annúminas are a real tour de force in melee, actually taking some friendly fire from his own teammates' axe throwers. But a lot of the Gwathi Rockdor have already been expended. The Mumakil here, destroying the stakes. That's something which I'm not sure many people are aware of. Mumakil will destroy stakes when they move through them. So that's nice. Lowering the chances, perhaps, that his own ally will charge into those stakes. Oof. But over here, it does look as though Imladris is going to be able to tie up what's left of the Arthedain forces, the Arthedain infantry anyway. So Arthedain's infantry force is going to be destroyed, and that is going to leave them with just the mounted Knights of Annúminas. But that is obviously probably the most important unit that Thoma 1994 could hope to have, or Toma 1994. I think the problem that the red team are going to have here is the fact that their infantry is just not up to the task in most cases. Imladris still have enough numbers, I think, to just sort of tank it out in melee, which means it's going to come down essentially to the Knights of Annúminas and the Mumakil getting good charges off, which they are doing, to be fair. They're running around the battlefield getting nice damage off on all of these units. These pikes and halberds have not been in formation for quite some time, which has led to their engagement against the Eldaranwe not going as well as they would have hoped. Eldar Quinga also shooting into the back of this Dwarven force over here, bypassing that shield value on the Ironfoot warriors. And yeah, there's around the battlefield, what I'm seeing at the moment is just pockets of Imladris forces, which are just going to be super awkward for the red team to deal with. Those Ironfoot crossbows will be able to help though. Haru Quinga from Lord Griffiths. Those spearmen have returned from routing. I doubt they're really going to be up to much in melee against the Imladris forces, however. Again, another strong point. There's actually still Arthedain pikemen in melee, which I'm actually quite impressed with. A lot of the Arthedain pike line was destroyed extremely quickly by Imladris. Here are the Haru Hatal on the front line as well. Heavy elven spears, obviously so efficient. Those axe throwers trying to get into position. The Arthedain pikes backed up by the Muhad berserkers, but cheaper axemen struggle against the elves. Even where their AP can be useful, like against Imladris, their lower skill just in general really does not stand them in the best of steads. Over here, the Fornos to Rain Knights have been fighting for a long time as well. They've punched above their weight here, but that's going to be the end of them. They do rout, and that is going to free up a lot of Ending Flames infantry. And a lot of it is spears as well, which bodes ill for the Knights of Annúminas. What's happening here? These Ironfoot pikes have gone quite far into the Elven territory, engaging Imladris Guardians. They're being assisted by the big flappy stompies that are the Mumakil.
If we continue like this, we will smash the enemy.
The Ballista's still trying to do work, which credit to Baconfish for keeping his artillery crew mounted, because they have been getting some decent damage done. Meanwhile, these Knights of Annúminas have just absolutely pasted this unit of Haru Quinga, which was chasing after the Dwarven crossbowman. It's a scary unit to have alive in the late game, the Knights of Annúminas, because they're so powerful and they're so durable as well. Really, I've noticed them and the Carmel's Dragon Knights from Rune, they just tend to last so long, even in comparison to other knights. Heavy armour, a scary sight to behold. Harry McKeel moving away, the pikes, the warriors. So this really is the Dwarven reinforcements. They were victorious here in the backfield, killing 2 generals here, Captain Gervase, and now moving in with reinforcements. There's only a single unit of IMLADRIS Guardians in the way as well, before they can start attacking the soft artillery piece. There's only 1 Mumakil left alive. Is it running amok? It's hard. Yes, it is. It's running amok now. So finally the Mumakil, they have lost control of it. The God Helene Einauer as well, who they presumably have been shooting this whole time from Ending Flame, but it's very hard to keep track of individual skirmishes. Now they're going to be committed to melee, and they are strong in melee. So this, again, could be exactly the sort of unit they need. Over here, this really is the engagement to take it all in and amongst the Mumakil corpses. It says the dead bodies are running amok, but highly questionable. But with the assistance of all of Ending Flame's victorious infantry after he sort of thoroughly destroyed Arthur Dane's infantry force, I don't feel as though the Dwarves and Harad have got enough left in the tank. Especially not Harad, because their infantry just in general was not the primary focus. You can see they're already routing. Muhad Berserkers have returned, but the Knights of Anuminas I don't think are going to be enough. The Dwarves are sort of trying to do what they can with their crossbows, but you can see here now with Ending Flame's reinforcements, Eldarenwe Harry Hatal also from Lord Griffiths, I think IMLADRIS have finally they finally gained the upper hand in this fight in a way that I don't think the red team are going to be able to come back from. Hashari Shadows, that's something that I've missed as well. They've been running around, no, Shadows indeed. I did not notice them moving around. There goes the Haradrim General. He was in the Hashari unit. Interesting. That would explain why I could see them in the composition video. How dumb of me. But Mounted Rangers, so again, the Hashari Shadows and the Grey Company, both in this fight. Mounted Rangers can be very, very deadly, of course, but the problem with using Horse Archers against a very skirmish-heavy Elven force like this is the Elven Archer is going to be so easily able to zone out all skirmishers. The only time I would say that isn't the case is if you're facing a force that is extremely Horse Archer heavy like Rohan or Khand. Khand especially with their slightly tankier horse skirmishers as well. But even then I would say that IMLADRIS could just sit there and zone out the Horse Archers. I feel as though it probably would have been a little better, ultimately in hindsight, for Harad to get a little bit more in terms of their infantry, because both Harad and Arthur Dane's infantry was so thoroughly outclassed by IMLADRIS. Erebor actually held their ground very well. I think Erebor actually punched above their weight here. They did a lot of damage. That, you know, he managed to kill off 2 of the 3 IMLADRIS generals, which is not a bad day's work. You can see here that more Harry Quinga. Unorthodox army from Baconfish once again, I must say. Very ranged focus with horse archers, foot archers and 2 artillery pieces, and ultimately he did have to he was in a constant fighting retreat, so trying to kite the enemy back, which was risky because that technically left Griffiths' army open to being sort of sideswiped, which I think Harad did try to do actually, but Harad were the last ones you wanted to do that because they had the lowest quality infantry on the field, so they ultimately ended up just getting destroyed by IMLADRIS units. But yeah, it's just clean up now. The Mumakil's running amok. The Harad forces routing all over the place. The Dwarves going to be the last ones standing, and I do believe of all the red team players, the Erebor one was probably the MVP there. There goes Dane as I say that. At the hands of the God Helene. Hashari Shadows doing their best. As far as the IMLADRIS team goes, I feel as though they just worked together pretty well in tandem, and they started off in a pretty ropey fashion with how they lost that Cav engagement. You know, I was actually fearing the worst for IMLADRIS there, because if you make a sloppy move as the Elves and lose a bunch of units, you know, that's a big portion of your army. You know, the Orcs can afford to lose a few units because they're so numerous and so cheap, but that is not the case with IMLADRIS at all. And yet, they managed to come back from that very resolutely. Again, you could criticise the Elves for perhaps being very defensive, but I don't even think that's a fair criticism. You know, the harassment, particularly with Lord Griffiths, you know, he was very forward with his general unit of all things. Being very aggressive with his general, doing a lot of damage to those Dwarven Axe Throwers. He even went in for a charge on the Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin. And just in general, you couldn't have asked Baconfish to be too offensive with so many skirmish units against the Dwarves of all things. And Ending Flame, he managed to zone out those Harad skirmishers and then ended up utterly vanquishing the Arthur infantry. So overall, I think it was a good all-round performance from IMLADRIS. I feel as though the compositions... The compositions were probably the thing which... IMLADRIS definitely had the more suitable compositions to win this, I feel like. I think Erebor had a good army, which is why they probably ended up doing the best of all of these units, but when charging into the stakes. Not that it's going to make much difference now. The Knights of Illuminus are just going to be sort of surrounded on all sides by very angry elves who are going to show the finest that men have to offer, that they are still nothing before the knife ears.
Victory is ours.
There we go. Good field battle, that. Very enjoyable. IMLADRIS ultimately had the better of it, though. Their quality carrying the day, as every IMLADRIS victory is always going to have to do. You can see, obviously, much smaller armies across the board, so, you know, while the kills do look very heavily lopsided in favour of IMLADRIS, the ratio is about right. And obviously, Arthedain going for by far the biggest army, he had a lot of militia, a lot of basic pikes, basic archers. He had a fair amount of cavalry as well, but ultimately his front line, his militia got there far too quickly. They were far too far away from the pikes. Obviously then the pikes had no support once the militia had already routed. Not a great engagement for Thoma. Bloodbath McGrath, he had his ups and downs in this fight. Initially that Cav engagement went very well for him. Obviously he then started using his Serpent Guard maybe a little bit too aggressively, and then he threw his infantry into the middle there, trying to sort of take advantage of the holes that were there, which could have worked if his infantry force was a little bit more substantial. As it was, they were just not up to the task of fighting IMLADRIS in melee. Captain Gervase did slightly better than his allies, I think, but that was mainly again down to his composition. I think the IMLADRIS composition is just in general well suited. They had enough archers to fairly easily deal with a lot of the horse archers, so the Haradrim Raiders, the mounted rangers, all fairly easy to deal with for this sort of IMLADRIS composition. You know, this would have been much more risky if they were facing off against 3 rush armies, because then Baconfish's army in particular would have been struggling. Like if you imagine Baconfish was going up against an Angmar rush army, he would have been in a pretty substantial amount of trouble. But ultimately, you know, compositions can be where the battle is won or lost, and I feel as though the compositions definitely gave IMLADRIS the edge, but very well played to all the IMLADRIS players nonetheless, and thank you to Lord Griffiths for sending this to me. Speaking of which, let's see what did the damage for him. 3 units of... no, wait, that's Baconfish. 3 units of Harry Quinga, the MVPs of his army, which, considering that was where he dumped most of his money and that was where most of the risk was, vindicates his army composition a little bit. His cavalry, not as impressive on the surface of things, but he did throw his cavalry into an engagement with both the Erebor Cavalry and the Arthedain Cavalry while it was under fire from the Grey Company. So those numbers make a little bit more sense when you think about it like that. As far as Lord Griffiths goes, his aggressive use of his knights bore fruit. He did good damage behind the lines, sort of giving support to his ally as well, Baconfish, using them. Ultimately it did end up costing his general his life when he charged into the Ironfoot pikes, but a good return before that. A lot of his units doing really very, very well down here. All of his infantry, the IMLADRIS Guardians, far too strong for the Haradrim infantry. And then finally, Ending Flame, Harry Quinga getting the most amount of kills in his army by the looks of things, and also his IMLADRIS Guardians. Just in general, the IMLADRIS Guardians were fantastic in this fight, and obviously the Harry McKeel doing quite well as well. Mixed bag, perhaps the Eldar Atar got, I think they got massacred by the Hashari actually, the Hashari Stalkers, and perhaps the Shadows as well. Only 1 kill on them before they routed after all. But yeah, good match this. I feel as though this really showcases how strong IMLADRIS can be, especially when sort of you work well in tandem like this. It can be really very, very difficult if you're facing off against all elves on the other team and they are on point with their teamwork. It can be really very, very difficult to face off against that sort of thing, and that is true in 0.96, and it will also be true in 0.97. So yeah, well played. Good job to IMLADRIS for winning this one. And I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.